The day they took my home office, they thought they were just moving a desk. I was standing in the hallway when my mother said it, her hand resting lightly on the doorframe like she was introducing a guest into a room that had always belonged to everyone. "Your brother needs a quiet space to focus," she added, her tone soft, reasonable, the kind of tone that leaves no space for disagreement without making you look unreasonable in return. I looked past her shoulder into the room. My room. The desk was gone. The monitors were stacked against the wall like they were waiting for instructions that would never come. The chair, my chair, had been replaced with something cheaper, something temporary. Something that wasn't mine. My brother stood by the window, already on a call, his voice louder than it needed to be. Confident. Practiced. Like he had been preparing for this moment longer than I had known. He didn't look at me. Not once. I nodded. "Of course," I said, because I have always known when a decision has already been made without me. "My name is Tige Monroe. I work from home." That's what I tell people when they ask, because it's easier than explaining what I actually do. Easier than watching their expression change halfway through the explanation. I built everything I have inside that room. Quietly. Without announcements. Without applause. I notice patterns. Small shifts. The kind of things most people dismiss until they become problems. That has always been my strength. And my mistake. Because I saw this coming. Not the exact moment. Not the exact sentence. But the pattern. The way my mother started mentioning how flexible my work was. The way my father stopped asking about what I was doing and started asking where I was doing it. The way my brother began spending more time near that door, like he was measuring it without touching it. I saw it. I just didn't stop it. Dinner that night was quiet in the way that only families can be when everyone knows something has shifted but no one is willing to name it. My father cleared his throat once, then again, like he was preparing to say something important, but the words never came. My mother filled the silence. Instead. "It's just temporary," she said, placing a plate in front of me without meeting my eyes. "Until your brother gets back on his feet." I smiled. "Of course," I repeated, because repetition has a way of making things sound more true than they are. My brother laughed at something on his phone. Not with us. Not at us. Just near us. Like we were background noise in a life that was finally aligning for him. I finished dinner. I washed my plate. I dried it. I placed it back exactly where it belonged. Then I walked past the hallway again. The door was open now. He had already moved in. Laptop open. Shoes off. Comfortable. Established. Like he had always been there. I stood there for a moment. Not long. Long enough to understand something clearly. That room was never just a room to me. And it was never just a room to them either. It was a convenience. A resource. Something that could be reassigned when priorities shifted. And priorities had shifted. I stepped inside. Quietly. He glanced at me this time, just briefly. "Hey," he said, casual, like we were equals in a situation that had already been decided. "Hope you don't mind. I really needed this." I nodded. "I understand," I said, and I meant it. I do understand. I understand exactly how people justify taking something that doesn't belong to them when they believe they need it more. I understand how easily value becomes invisible when it isn't loud. I understand how families can convince themselves that fairness and convenience are the same thing. I looked around the room one last time. The walls were the same. The light was the same. But it was no longer mine. Not in the way that mattered. "If you need anything," I added politely, "just let me know." He smiled, relieved, like I had just made everything easier for him. And maybe I had. I stepped out. Closed the door behind me. Softly. That night, I packed a small bag. Not everything. Just what I needed. The things no one ever notices until they're gone. I moved through the house the same way I always did. Quiet. Considered. My mother was in the living room watching television. My father had already gone to bed. No one asked where I was going. No one thought to ask. I paused at the front door, my hand resting on the handle for a second longer than necessary. Then I opened it. Stepped outside. And left. I did not go far that night. Just far enough that no one would hear the door if it opened behind me. The air outside was cooler than I expected, the kind of quiet that only shows up after midnight when the neighborhood finally stops pretending to be busy. I sat in my car for a moment without turning the engine on. Hands resting on the steering wheel. Not shaking. Just still. There is a difference. I checked my phone. No messages. No missed calls. That part did not surprise me. People only notice absence when it interrupts something they need. I started the car and drove. Not fast. Not slow. Just steady. The kind of drive where your mind moves ahead of you, organizing things before you arrive. I had already decided where I was going hours earlier, long before I packed the bag. A small furnished apartment across town. 600 square feet. Neutral walls. Minimal furniture. Temporary. But quiet. I unlocked the door, stepped inside, and placed my bag on the floor. No ceremony. No hesitation. I turned on the light. One lamp. Soft yellow. It was enough. I sat down at the small table near the window and opened my laptop. Not the one they saw me use. The other one. The one that never stayed in the office. The one no one ever asked about. I signed in. Everything was still there. Of course it was. I have always been careful about where things actually live. Systems do not belong to rooms. They belong to people who understand them. I checked the dashboards. Accounts. Access points. Permissions. All active. All functioning. For now. I leaned back slightly and allowed myself a small breath. Not relief. Just confirmation. The next morning, I woke up at 6. Same as always. Routine is not something I break just because circumstances change. I made coffee. Black. No sugar. I sat at the same table and reviewed the overnight activity. Numbers. Movement. Patterns. Everything exactly where it should be. At 8:15, my phone lit up. My mother. I let it ring once. Twice. Then I answered. Good morning, Mom. My voice was calm. Polite. The way she prefers. There was a pause on the other end. Not long. Just enough to suggest she was choosing her tone. Tige, where are you? She asked, like the question had only just occurred to her. I glanced at the window. The light was coming in softer now. I stepped out for a few days, I said. I did not want to be in the way. Another pause. Slightly longer this time. You could have told us, she replied. I nodded, even though she could not see me. I did not think it was necessary, I said gently. Everything at home seems to be working well. She exhaled quietly. Your brother is trying to get settled, she said. He has a lot on his plate. I understand, I said. And I did. I always understand. That is why I rarely argue. We ended the call shortly after. No conflict. No raised voices. Just two people agreeing to leave certain things unspoken. I set the phone down and returned to my screen. Around 10, I noticed the first shift. Small. Subtle. A login attempt from a familiar location. Home. My brother. He was trying to access one of the shared systems. Not unusual. Except the permissions were no longer aligned with what he expected. He tried again. Then again. I watched the pattern. Timing. Frequency. Hesitation between attempts. Confusion tends to have a rhythm if you know how to read it. At 11:23, my father called. That was earlier than usual. I let it ring once. Then answered. Good morning, Dad. His voice was measured. Controlled. Tige, your brother is having trouble with the setup in your old office, he said. He says some of the programs are not responding. I turned slightly in my chair, resting my elbow on the table. That is possible, I replied. Some of those systems require specific configurations. Silence. Not empty. Just careful. Can you walk him through it? He asked. I smiled, faintly. Not unkind. I would be happy to help, I said. But I would need access to review everything properly. Another pause. This one longer. You should still have access, he said. I looked at the screen in front of me. The access logs. The changes I made before I left. Quiet changes. Invisible to anyone who did not know where to look. That depends, I said softly, on what you believe I still have. He did not answer right away. And for the first time since I walked out of that house, I heard something new in his silence. Not authority. Not assumption. Something closer to uncertainty. I let it sit there. Just for a moment. Then I added, gently, if you need me, I am available. I ended the call and returned my attention to the screen. Outside, the day moved forward like nothing had changed. Inside, something already had. By noon, the pattern had changed. Not louder. Just more frequent. Failed access attempts. Interrupted processes. A system that was never designed to be understood without context was now being handled by someone who believed familiarity was the same as control. I watched the logs update in real time. Timestamps. Locations. Repeated actions that circled back on themselves. My brother was not breaking anything. Not yet. He was simply pressing on doors that no longer opened the way he expected. At 12:47, my phone lit up again. This time, it was my brother. I let it ring once. Then I answered. Hello. His voice came in fast. Not rude. Just unsteady. Hey, Tige. I think something is off with your setup. Some of the accounts are not syncing and I cannot access a few of the dashboards. I leaned back slightly, letting the silence sit for half a second longer than usual. That can happen, I said calmly. Those systems depend on specific permissions. He exhaled. Can you just tell me what to click? He asked. There it was. The assumption that everything reduces to a button if you just know where to look. I glanced at the screen. Another failed attempt. Same endpoint. Same result. It is not really about clicking, I replied. It is about structure. A pause. Short. Frustrated. I am in the office now. Everything is here. It should work. I nodded, though he could not see me. The room has everything it needs, I said softly. The systems do not. He did not respond right away. I could hear movement on his end. A chair shifting. A keyboard. The small sounds people make when they are trying to solve something they do not fully understand. Did you change something? He asked finally. Not accusing. Not yet. Just searching. I rested my hand on the table, fingers lightly touching the edge. I adjusted a few things before I left, I said. Nothing important. Silence again. This time heavier. Because now there was a gap between what he believed and what he was experiencing. Gaps create questions. Questions create pressure. Can you come back and fix it? He asked. The word fix hung in the air longer than it should have. I smiled slightly. Not unkind. There is nothing broken, I said. It is just not configured for you. Another pause. Longer now. I could almost hear the shift in his thinking. From confidence to uncertainty. From assumption to awareness. I have a meeting in 30 minutes, he said. I need those numbers. I looked at the clock on my screen. 12:59. Then you should use the access you have, I replied gently. It will show you exactly what is available. He let out a short breath. Not quite a sigh. Not quite controlled. That is the problem, he said. It is not showing anything. I tilted my head slightly, watching another log update. A restriction triggering exactly as intended. That would suggest the permissions are doing their job, I said. He did not answer. And in that silence, something settled. Not anger. Not yet. Something quieter. The realization that this was not a quick adjustment. This was a system he did not own. At 1:15, my mother called again. I answered the same way. Calm. Even. Hi, Mom. Her voice was different this time. Softer, but tighter around the edges. Your brother is under a lot of pressure, she said. He really needs things to work right now. I looked out the window. A car passed slowly down the street. Everything outside remained unchanged. I understand, I said. Pressure tends to reveal how systems are built. She hesitated. Can you help him? She asked. There was a time when that question would have come with expectation. Now it came with uncertainty. That difference matters. I can guide him, I said. But I cannot make decisions for him inside a system that is not his. Another pause. Longer. Careful. It is just a room, Tige, she said. Quietly. I let that sit between us. Just a room. The same sentence. The same framing. I nodded slowly, even though she could not see it. Yes, Mom, I replied. That is exactly what it is. We ended the call shortly after. I set the phone down and returned to my screen. The logs continued. Attempts. Denials. Adjustments that led nowhere. And somewhere in that pattern, I saw the beginning of something inevitable. Not failure. Not yet. But the shape of it. Clear. Predictable. Already in motion. At 1:42, the first real break appeared. Not in the system. In the rhythm. The attempt stopped for almost 3 full minutes. No new entries. No repeated access logs. Just stillness. That kind of stillness usually means one of two things. Either someone has stepped away, or someone has realized they are no longer in control. At 1:45, my phone rang again. My brother. I answered on the second ring. Hi. His voice was different now. Slower. Measured in a way that did not come naturally to him. Tige. I think I locked myself out of something, he said. I did not respond immediately. I let the sentence settle, the way you let numbers sit before you decide what they mean. That can happen, I said. Systems are designed to protect themselves when access patterns change. He exhaled quietly. Not frustration this time. Something closer to concern. I cannot pull any of the reports, he continued. The meeting is in 15 minutes. I turned slightly toward my screen. The logs confirmed it. Restricted pathways. Authentication loops. A system that recognized intent without granting authority. Then you should not rely on those reports, I said calmly. You should work with what you can verify. A pause. Then, that is not how this works, he replied. I smiled faintly. It is exactly how it works, I said. You just were not the one managing it before. Silence. Not empty. Just heavier now. Because the gap had widened. Can you log in from your end? He asked. I rested my fingers lightly against the edge of the table. I can see everything I need to see, I said. That is not the same as stepping in. Another pause. This one longer. I need you to step in, he said finally. The word need was new. It had not been there before. I let that sit. Not to punish. Just to understand. What do you need me to do? I asked gently. He hesitated. Then, fix it. There it was again. The assumption that control can be handed back without consequence. There is nothing broken, I said. There are just boundaries in place. He did not respond right away. I could hear movement again. Faster this time. A drawer opening. Papers shifting. The small sounds people make when they are trying to regain ground they did not realize they lost. Dad is asking questions, he said. He does not understand why nothing is working. I looked at the screen. Another restriction triggered. Quiet. Precise. That is understandable, I replied. He was not involved in how it was built. At 2:02, my father called. I answered the same way. Calm. Respectful. Hi, Dad. His voice carried something it had not carried before. Not authority. Not certainty. Wait. Tige, we need to talk about this, he said. I leaned back slightly, allowing the chair to settle under me. We are talking, I replied. A pause. Then, your brother cannot access the systems he needs, he said. This is affecting his work. I nodded slowly. Access is tied to structure, I said. And structure requires understanding. He exhaled. Controlled. You should have told us this would happen, he said. I let that sit. Just for a moment. I did not expect anything to happen, I replied gently. I simply adjusted things to reflect current ownership. Silence. He did not speak immediately. And in that silence, something shifted. Not dramatically. Just enough. Ownership, he repeated. The word sounded unfamiliar in his voice. I glanced at the screen again. Everything steady. Everything aligned exactly as intended. Yes, I said. Systems respond to who is responsible for them. Another pause. Longer this time. We did not take anything from you, he said. There it was. The framing. The version of the story that makes everything easier to accept. I kept my tone even. You reassigned a space, I said. I reassigned control. No anger. No emphasis. Just a statement. He did not respond right. Away. And for the first time, the silence on his end felt different. Not defensive. Not dismissive. Just uncertain. At 2:15, the call ended. No resolution. No raised voices. Just a conversation that had started to move in a direction no one had planned for. I set the phone down and returned to my screen. Outside, the afternoon light had shifted slightly, casting longer shadows across the floor. Inside, the system continued exactly as it should. Quiet. Structured. Unaffected by who was sitting in which room. And somewhere across town, in a house that had not changed at all, everything was beginning to feel different. By mid-afternoon, the system stopped resisting quietly. It began responding. Not with errors. With limits. Clean. Precise. Intentional. I watched the activity logs shift from confusion to containment. My brother was no longer trying random access points. He had started repeating the same few paths. The ones that used to work. The ones he thought defined control. At 3:10, my phone rang again. My father. I answered without delay. Hello, Dad. His voice was slower this time, measured in a way that suggested he had been thinking. Tige, we need clarity, he said. Not urgency. Not demand. Clarity. That was new. I adjusted slightly in my chair. What would you like to understand? I asked. A brief pause. Your brother has a client call scheduled this afternoon, he said. He cannot access the financial projections or the live reports. He is telling me those are critical. I looked at the screen. The reports were there. Exactly where they had always been. Accessible to the person who had built them. They are available, I said. Just not through the path he is using. Silence. Then, explain that to me, he replied. I rested my hand lightly against the table. The system was never designed around location, I said. It was designed around authorization. The room gave the appearance of access. It did not grant it. He did not respond immediately. And in that gap, I could hear something shifting again. Not resistance. Recognition. So sitting in that office does not give him control, he said slowly. No, I replied. Understanding does. Another pause. Longer this time. Then help him understand, he said. I smiled faintly. I have been, I answered. At 3:24, another call came in. My brother again. I let it ring once before answering. Hi. His voice was tighter now. Not raised. Just compressed under pressure. The call is in 6 minutes, he said. I need those numbers now. I glanced at the clock. 3:24. Then you should present what you can verify, I replied calmly. And clarify what is pending. He exhaled sharply. That is not acceptable, he said. I tilted my head slightly. To whom? I asked. Silence. A short one. But enough. To the client, he said. I nodded. Then the client is expecting accuracy, I replied. Not access. Another pause. Longer now. You are making this harder than it needs to be, he said. I let that settle. Not rejecting it. Not accepting it. Just placing it where it belonged. I am not making anything harder, I said quietly. I am allowing the system to function as it was built. He did not respond. I could hear movement again. Faster now. A chair scraping. Papers shifting. If you do not help me, this is going to reflect badly, he said. I kept my voice even. On whom? I asked. Silence. This time, longer. Because now the question had direction. At 3:30, the logs showed something new. External attention. A client attempting to access shared materials. The request went through. Partial visibility. Limited data. Enough to raise questions. Not enough to answer them. At 3:32, my brother spoke again, lower now. They are asking why the projections are incomplete, he said. I watched the screen update. The system doing exactly what it was designed to do. Protect structure. Maintain integrity. Then you should explain the transition, I said. Clearly. Calmly. He let out a breath. Not controlled this time. There is no transition, he said. I looked at the logs. The timestamps. The sequence of decisions that led here. There is always a transition, I replied. It just depends on whether you acknowledge it. Silence. Not just on the call. In the pattern. For a moment everything paused. Then at 3:36, the call ended. Not abruptly. Just finished. I set the phone down and returned to the screen. Outside, the light had shifted again. Late afternoon now. Inside, the system remained steady. Consistent. Unmoved by urgency. And somewhere across town, in a room that looked exactly the same as it had that morning, the difference between appearance and control had finally become impossible to ignore. At 4:12, the system stopped reacting entirely. No more repeated attempts. No more forced entries. Just a clean, quiet line of activity that suggested something had changed on the other end. Not resolution. Recognition. I watched the log settle into a slower rhythm. Fewer actions. More pauses. That is what happens when urgency gives way to awareness. At 4:18, my phone lit up again. My father. I answered on the first ring this time. Hello, Dad. His voice was different. Not just measured. Controlled in a way that required effort. Tige, we need to approach this differently, he said. I shifted slightly in my chair, resting my hand against the table. What would you like to change? I asked. A brief pause. Then, your brother's call did not go as planned, he said. Not defensive. Not blaming. Just stating a fact that had already settled into the room. I nodded slowly. That can happen when the information is incomplete, I replied. Silence. Not empty. Just careful. The client has requested a follow-up, he continued. They want full access to the projections before moving forward. I glanced at the screen. The request had already appeared. Timestamped. Logged. Waiting. That is a reasonable request, I said. They are making decisions based on those numbers. Another pause. Then, your brother cannot provide them, he said. I let that sit. Not as a conclusion. As a starting point. Not in the current structure, I replied. He exhaled slowly. The kind of breath that comes when something is becoming clear but not yet comfortable. Then we need you involved, he said. The word need returned. More grounded this time. Less reactive. I kept my tone even. I am already involved, I said. Just not in the way you are used to. Silence again. Then, come home, he said. 2 words. Simple. Direct. But different from before. I looked at the light shifting across the floor. Late afternoon now. The day moving forward without waiting for anyone to catch up. To do what? I asked gently. A pause. Longer this time. To fix this, he said. There it was again. The same framing. The same assumption. I let it settle. Then I responded quietly. There is nothing broken, I said. There is only a system responding to who is managing it. He did not answer right away. And for a moment, the silence stretched long enough to carry something new. Not resistance. Not dismissal. Something closer to reconsideration. At 4:31, another call came in. My brother. I answered after one ring. Hi. His voice was lower now. Controlled in a way that suggested he had adjusted his approach. The client wants a full breakdown by tomorrow morning, he said. Every detail. I glanced at the screen. The request was already categorized. Prioritized. Structured. That is standard, I replied. They are asking for visibility. A short pause. Then, I cannot give them that, he said. Not frustrated. Just factual now. That was new. I nodded slightly. Not without understanding how it is built, I said. Silence. Then, I need you to walk me through it, he said. The tone had shifted. Less assumption. More request. I let that settle. Not as leverage. As information. That depends, I said calmly. On what you are asking me to walk you through. Another pause. Longer. Everything, he said. I leaned back slightly, letting the chair settle under me. Everything takes time, I replied. And responsibility. He did not respond immediately. And in that gap, I could hear the shift again. Subtle. But real. What do you need from me? He asked. The question landed differently. Not because of the words. Because of the direction. I looked at the screen. The systems. The structure. The clarity that had always been there, just never acknowledged. I need you to understand what you are asking for, I said. Not just the outcome. The control that comes with it. Silence. Then, okay, he said quietly. One word. But it carried more weight than anything he had said all day. At 4:45, the call ended. Not abruptly. Not unresolved. Just paused. I set the phone down and returned my attention to the screen. The system remained steady. Unchanged. Consistent in a way that did not depend on who was sitting in which room. And somewhere across town, the difference between access and ownership had finally started to take shape in a way that could not be ignored anymore. By early evening, the house across town had gone quiet in a way that did not feel natural. Not peaceful. Not settled. Just quiet in the way systems go quiet before someone makes a decision they cannot undo. I could see it in the logs. Not because they were loud. Because they were careful. My brother had stopped trying to force access. He was reading now. Opening what little was visible. Moving slower. That was the first real change. At 5:12, my phone lit up again. This time, it was not a call. It was a message. From my brother. Can we talk? Not about fixing it. About understanding it. I read it once. Then again. The wording mattered. Not about fixing it. That part had finally shifted. I set the phone down for a moment, letting the silence in the room settle around me. Then I picked it up and replied. We can talk. The call came in less than a minute later. I answered. Hi. His voice was steady. Not confident. Not uncertain. Just controlled. I looked through what I could access, he said. I do not recognize most of it. I nodded slightly. That is expected, I replied. You were never given the full structure. A pause. Then, why? He asked. Not defensive. Not accusing. Just direct. I leaned back in my chair, letting the question sit where it belonged. Because it was not built for shared use, I said. It was built for responsibility. Silence. Not heavy this time. Just thoughtful. I thought it was just a workspace, he said quietly. I glanced at the screen. The systems. The layers. The decisions embedded in every line. That is how it looked, I said. Not how it functioned. Another pause. Then, how long has it been like this? He asked. I rested my hand lightly against the table. From the beginning, I replied. You just were not involved in it. He exhaled slowly. The kind of breath that comes when something simple turns out to be more complex than expected. Dad thought it would be easy, he said. He said moving me into the room would help me get started faster. I allowed myself a small smile. Not amused. Just acknowledging the pattern. It made sense from the outside, I said. From the inside, it changed everything. Silence again. Then, I see that now, he said. That was the first time he said something without resistance. Without justification. Just recognition. At 5:27, another message appeared. This time from my father. We would like you to come home tonight. We need to discuss this as a family. I read it once. The phrasing was careful. We would like. Not we need. That mattered. I did not respond immediately. Instead, I returned my attention to the call. They want you back, my brother said quietly, as if he had seen the message too. They want things to go back to normal. I tilted my head slightly. Define normal, I said. He hesitated. Then, the way it was before, he answered. I looked at the screen again. The structure. The clarity. The control that had always been there, just unrecognized. That version does not exist anymore, I said calmly. Silence. Then, what does exist? He asked. I let that question settle. Not because I did not have an answer. Because he needed to hear it in a way that would stay. A system that reflects who is responsible for it, I said. And a choice about how that responsibility is handled going forward. Another pause. Longer this time. And if we do not understand it? He asked. I leaned forward slightly, resting my hand flat against the table. Then it will continue to function without you, I said. Not harsh. Not threatening. Just true. He did not respond right away. And in that silence, something shifted again. Not confusion. Not pressure. Something closer to acceptance. Can you teach me? He asked finally. The question was simple. But it carried weight. I looked at the screen one more time. Everything steady. Everything aligned exactly as it should be. Then I spoke. I can show you, I said. But understanding requires more than access. It requires respect for how it was built. Silence. Then, quietly, okay, he said. At 5:42, the call ended. I picked up my phone and looked at my father's message again. The request was still there. Waiting. I typed a response. Not long. Not complicated. I will come by tonight. Around 7. I sent it. Then I closed the laptop slowly. Not because the system needed me. Because the conversation had moved somewhere new. And for the first time since I walked out of that house, I knew exactly what I was walking back into. Not the same room. Not the same roles. Something else. Something they had not expected when they moved a desk and thought that was all they were taking. I arrived at exactly 7. Not early. Not late. The house looked the same from the outside. Lights on. Curtains half drawn. Nothing to suggest anything had changed. I parked in the driveway, turned off the engine, and sat there for a moment. Just long enough to notice what I was not feeling. No hesitation. No urgency. Just clarity. I stepped out, walked to the front door, and rang the bell. The sound echoed inside in a way that felt unfamiliar. Like I was a guest. My mother opened the door. She smiled. Not wide. Careful. You are here, she said softly. I nodded. I said I would be. She stepped aside to let me in. The air inside felt the same. Warm. Familiar. Structured in a way that had always made everything appear stable. My father was in the living room. Standing. Not sitting. That was new. My brother was there too, leaning slightly against the edge of the hallway, closer to the office door than anything else. I walked in slowly. Not avoiding anyone. Not rushing toward anyone. Just present. Thank you for coming, my father said. His voice was steady. But not as certain as before. I inclined my head slightly. Of course. No one sat down. That was the first signal. Conversations like this do not begin with comfort. They begin with positioning. My mother spoke first. We did not realize how much depended on that room, she said. Her tone was gentle. But there was something underneath it now. Awareness. I looked at her. Then at my father. Then at my brother. It is not about the room, I said quietly. Silence followed. Not defensive. Not dismissive. Just waiting. My brother shifted slightly, then stepped forward. I understand that now, he said. His voice was controlled. Careful in a way that suggested he had been thinking about every word before saying it. I thought I was stepping into something that was already there. I did not realize I was stepping into something that required, he paused. Searching. Something I did not have. I nodded once. Responsibility, I said. He met my gaze. Yes, he said. No resistance. Just agreement. That mattered. My father exhaled slowly, then spoke. We made a decision too quickly, he said. We assumed the transition would be simple. I let that sit. Not correcting it. Not expanding on it. Just allowing it to exist as it was. Transitions are rarely simple, I replied. My mother stepped closer, her voice softer now. We were trying to help your brother, she said. I looked at her. I understand that, I said. And I did. Understanding has never been the issue. She hesitated. Then, we did not think it would affect you this way. I glanced briefly toward the hallway. The door to the office was still open. The same room. The same walls. But it did not feel the same anymore. It did not affect me, I said calmly. It revealed something. Silence. My father's expression shifted slightly. Not confusion. Not frustration. Something closer to realization. What did it reveal? He asked. I rested my hand lightly at my side. That what I built was seen as space, I said. Not as structure. No one spoke immediately. Because that sentence does not invite interruption. It invites reflection. My brother looked toward the office, then back at me. I could not access anything, he said. Not the reports. Not the projections. Nothing that actually mattered. I nodded. Because access follows understanding, I said. Not location. He exhaled slowly. Then teach me, he said. This time, there was no hesitation. No condition. Just a request. I held his gaze for a moment. Long enough to see that he meant it. Then I shifted my attention to my father. And you? I asked. What do you want from this? He did not answer immediately. He looked at the room. The hallway. The door that had caused all of this without changing at all. Then he looked back at me. I want to understand what we did not see, he said. That was the first honest answer of the night. I nodded once. Then I spoke. Then we start with clarity, I said. Not by putting things back the way they were. But by understanding why they cannot go back. Silence settled again. But this time it felt different. Not uncertain. Not tense. Just ready. I turned slightly toward the hallway. Toward the room that had never been just a room. We can begin there, I said quietly. And for the first time since I walked out of this house, no one moved ahead of me. They waited. I walked into the room first. Not because I needed to lead. Because I knew where everything actually began. The desk was positioned near the window now, angled differently than before. My chair was gone. Replaced with something that did not fit the space. My brother followed a step behind me. Then my father. Then my mother. No one spoke at first. They were looking at the room the way people look at something they thought they understood until they realized they did not. I stepped toward the desk and placed my hand lightly on the surface. This is where you thought everything happened, I said. My voice was calm. Even. My brother nodded once. Yes, he admitted. I looked at the laptop sitting there. Closed. Untouched for the moment. This is where it appeared to happen, I corrected gently. Silence. Then I turned slightly toward him. Sit, I said. He hesitated for half a second. Then he sat. Not casually. Carefully. Like the seat carried weight he could now feel. I moved beside him, not taking the chair, just standing close enough to see the screen when he opened it. Start where you usually start, I said. He opened the laptop. Logged in. Navigated to the same dashboards he had been trying all day. The same paths. The same assumptions. The screen loaded. Partial data. Limited access. He stopped. Looked at me. This is all I can see, he said quietly. I nodded. That is what your current permissions allow, I replied. My father stepped closer. Then. Show him the rest, he said. Not demanding. Just direct. I turned my head slightly toward him. The rest is not hidden, I said. It is structured. Then I reached into my bag and took out the other laptop. The one they had never seen in that room. The one that had never needed to be there. I placed it on the desk beside his. Opened it. Signed in. The full system appeared instantly. Complete. Ordered. Alive in a way the other screen was not. My brother leaned forward slightly. That is everything, he said. Not a question. A realization. I nodded once. This is the system, I said. Not the room. Not the desk. Not the chair. Silence settled around us again. But it was different now. Not uncertain. Not tense. Just clear. My mother spoke softly from behind us. We thought giving him this space would give him what he needed, she said. I did not turn around. Space does not transfer understanding, I replied. My brother's eyes moved between the two screens. The difference was no longer subtle. It was absolute. So what happens now? He asked. I let the question sit for a moment. Then I answered. Now you decide what you are actually asking for, I said. He looked at me. I want to learn it, he said. All of it. I studied his expression. Not for confidence. For consistency. Then I nodded slightly. Then we begin with structure, I said. Not access. My father exhaled slowly. And what about everything that was disrupted today? He asked. I glanced at the system. The logs. The requests. The client waiting for clarity. Nothing was disrupted, I said calmly. It was revealed. Silence again. My mother stepped closer this time. And you? She asked quietly. What do you need from us? I turned to face her fully. Not avoiding. Not softening. Just clear. I need you to see the difference, I said. Between what looks simple and what is actually built. No one spoke immediately. Because that is not a question. It is a line. One that separates how things were from how they have to be now. My brother closed his laptop slowly. Not out of frustration. Out of understanding. I thought I needed the room, he said. I nodded once. You needed the system, I replied. He looked around the space one more time. Then back at me. And you built it, he said. I did not answer right away. I let the silence carry that truth for a moment. Then I said, yes. My father stepped back slightly, his gaze moving across the room, then settling on me. We did not see it, he admitted. I held his gaze. No, I said. You saw the room. And for the first time, no one tried to correct that. No one tried to reframe it. They just stood there, in the same space they had rearranged days ago, finally understanding that nothing important had ever been incited at all. I closed my laptop gently. The screen went dark. The system did not. It never depended on where it sat. Only on who understood it. I picked up my bag and paused at the doorway. Not leaving. Not staying. Just standing at the point where everything had shifted. Then I said, quietly, some things are not taken when you move them. They are lost when you fail to recognize them. And this time, no one spoke after that.